My name is Audrey. I'm 29 years old, and last month I watched my father's face drain of all color at his own birthday dinner while 43 relatives sat frozen around the table. He had just finished his big announcement, the one he had been building up to all evening with that smug smile and those little hints about legacy and family and who really deserves what. He stood at the head of the table in his favorite navy blazer, champagne glass raised, and told everyone that he was officially transferring the family business, the house, and all the properties to my brother Daniel. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Audrey, you get a lesson in humility. Maybe now you will finally understand what it means to earn something instead of just taking." The room erupted in applause. My mother dabbed at her eyes like she was watching a Hallmark movie. My brother grinned and clapped my father on the back. Aunts and uncles nodded approvingly, murmuring about how generous my father was, how wise, how he really knew how to run a family. I sat at the far end of the table, the same seat I had been assigned at every family gathering for as long as I could remember. The seat closest to the kitchen, furthest from the head. The seat for the daughter who supposedly never contributed anything. For a moment, I did not move. I let his words hang in the air. I let the applause die down naturally. I let my brother's smirk settle into something he thought was permanent. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope I had been carrying for 3 weeks. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, and a few people glanced my way, probably expecting me to make some tearful exit, like I had at other family events when things got too cruel. Instead, I walked toward my father, holding the envelope like it was nothing important, just some papers, just some documents that might be interesting to look at. "Before you sign anything over to Daniel," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, "you might want to check who actually owns the business." My father laughed, that short, dismissive laugh he had perfected over decades of making me feel small. "Audrey, please, this is not the time for one of your little dramatic moments. Sit down." I did not sit down. I opened the envelope and pulled out the deed to the commercial property where his business operated, the one he had been running for 18 years, the one he bragged about at every barbecue and holiday party. I held it up so he could see his own signature at the bottom, and next to it, in neat legal print, the name of the owner, Audrey Marie Thompson. His smile flickered, then died. "What is this?" he asked, voice dropping. "This is the deed you had me sign when I was 22, I said. "You told me it was for tax purposes. You told me it was just paperwork, that it did not mean anything, that I was helping the family." I pulled out another document, the title to the warehouse property. Same story, my name. Then another, the LLC registration for the business itself, filed 7 years ago. Owner and sole member listed as Audrey Marie Thompson. By the time I had laid out the 5th document on the table, my father was gripping the edge of his chair like he might fall over. My mother's face had gone from tearful pride to something closer to panic. She kept looking between me and my father, her mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. Daniel had stopped smirking. He was staring at the papers like they were written in a language he did not understand. "You cannot do this," my father said, his voice rising. "Those documents were just for protection. For the family. You know that. You agreed to it." "I agreed to sign papers you put in front of me without explaining what they really meant," I replied. "I was 22. I trusted you. I thought I was helping." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I have spent the last 6 months with a lawyer," I continued, "and according to every legal opinion I have received, these are not just for protection. These are ownership documents, real ones, filed with the state, recorded with the county, recognized by every bank and creditor your business has ever dealt with." My father's face shifted from shock to something darker. That look I knew too well. The one that came before he started yelling, before he started making everything my fault. "You ungrateful little—" "Harold," my mother cut in, her voice sharp and frightened. "Harold, stop. People are watching." He caught himself, glancing around at the relatives who had gone from celebratory to confused to deeply uncomfortable in the span of about 90 seconds. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, tucked it under my arm, and looked at my father one last time. "I am not here to cause a scene," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that before you start making promises about who gets what. You should probably talk to your own lawyer. Because as of right now, according to every piece of paper that matters, you do not actually own anything to give away." I walked out of that dining room alone, past the silent tables and the shocked faces, past my brother, who looked like someone had just told him Christmas was canceled forever. As the door closed behind me, I heard my mother's voice rise in that hysterical pitch she reserves for emergencies. "Harold, what did you do? What did you sign?" I did not stay to hear his answer. If you want to know how a daughter who was treated like the family disappointment ended up holding the deed to everything her father built, and what happened in the weeks after that dinner when they finally realized I was not bluffing, stay with me until the end. To understand how I ended up holding documents my father never meant for me to actually use, you need to understand what it was like growing up in that house. My father, Harold Thompson, built his HVAC installation business from nothing. That was the story he told at every dinner party, every family gathering, every chance he got. Started with one truck and a toolbox. Now look at me. And people did look. They saw a successful businessman with a nice house in the suburbs outside Denver, a wife who hosted beautiful holiday parties, and 2 kids who smiled in all the right photos. What they did not see was the way he divided us from the very beginning. Daniel was 3 years older than me. From the moment I can remember, he was the one my father talked about with pride. Daniel's grades, Daniel's baseball games, Daniel's college applications, Daniel's internship at a real company, not like those little jobs other kids waste their time on. I was the other one, the quiet daughter who liked books more than sports, who asked too many questions, who somehow never seemed to do anything worth mentioning. When Daniel graduated high school, my father threw a massive party, rented out a restaurant, invited half the neighborhood, gave a speech about how his son was going to carry on the family legacy. When I graduated 2 years later, we had cake at home. My mother forgot to buy candles. In college, Daniel studied business because that was what our father wanted. I studied accounting because I thought maybe if I understood numbers, if I could be useful in some concrete way, my father might finally see me as something other than an afterthought. It almost worked. When I came home for summer break after my junior year, my father actually asked me to help with some paperwork at the office. I was so excited I barely slept the night before. That was the first time he put a document in front of me and told me to sign. "It is just for tax purposes," he said, barely looking up from his computer. "Having your name on some things helps with liability. Your brother is already on a few accounts. Standard family business stuff." I signed. I did not read the whole thing. I trusted him. Over the next few years, it happened again and again. A form here, a signature there, always with the same casual dismissal. Just paperwork, just protection, just helping the family. I was 22 when I signed the deed to the main commercial property, 24 when my name went on the warehouse, 25 when the LLC restructuring happened, and somehow I became the sole member on paper. Each time my father made it sound like nothing. Each time I believed him, because I desperately wanted to be part of something, to be included, to matter. Meanwhile, Daniel was being groomed as the real successor. He got the corner office at the company. He got introduced to clients as my son, the future of Thompson HVAC. He got a down payment for his first house pulled directly from company accounts as a business investment in his future. I got to sign papers and then go back to my apartment in the city, where I worked as a staff accountant at a mid-sized firm, never quite understanding why my father needed my signature, but never needed my presence. The truth started to crack open about 8 months ago. I was doing my taxes, sorting through the mountain of forms that pile up when you work in finance, when I noticed something strange. A K-1 form from Thompson HVAC LLC listing me as the sole member with 100% ownership interest. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out every document I had ever signed for my father and actually read them. What I found made my hands shake. According to the paperwork, I owned everything. Not shared ownership with my father, not a small stake for tax purposes. Everything. The building, the warehouse, the business itself, even a rental property I did not know existed until I saw my name on the title. My father had been running his company, making decisions, collecting profits, and paying himself a salary from a business that legally belonged entirely to me. At first, I thought it must be a mistake, some clerical error, some misunderstanding. I called my father to ask about it, trying to keep my voice casual. "Dad, I was doing my taxes and I noticed some forms from the business. Can we talk about how everything is structured? I want to make sure I am filing correctly." His response was immediate and sharp. "Do not worry about that. I handle all of it. Just sign whatever your accountant puts in front of you and send it in. It is not your concern." Not my concern. The business that had my name on every legal document was not my concern. That night, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not a family friend, not someone my father knew, a stranger at a firm downtown who specialized in business ownership disputes. Her name was Patricia. She had gray hair, reading glasses, and a way of looking at documents that reminded me of a surgeon examining an X-ray. I brought her everything, every form I had signed, every deed, every registration, every tax document. She spread them across her conference table and spent 2 hours going through them while I sat there trying not to panic. When she finally looked up, her expression was carefully neutral. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "do you understand what these documents represent?" I told her I was starting to. She nodded slowly. "According to every filing I can see here, you are the legal owner of Thompson HVAC LLC and all associated properties. Your father appears to have structured everything in your name, likely to protect assets from potential creditors or legal liability. This is not uncommon, but it is usually done with shell companies or trusts, not by putting everything directly in a family member's name without their full understanding." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I did not have an answer that day. I went home, sat in my dark apartment, and thought about every time my father had made me feel like I was worthless, every dinner where I was ignored, every holiday where my brother was celebrated while I was tolerated. And I thought about what would happen if I did nothing. My father would keep running the business. My brother would eventually inherit everything through some legal maneuver I would probably be asked to sign. And I would keep being the invisible daughter who helped without ever being acknowledged. Something in me shifted that night. Not anger exactly, something colder. Something that had been building for 29 years. I called Patricia the next morning and told her I wanted to understand every single right I had as the legal owner of those properties. I wanted to know exactly what my father could and could not do without my consent, and I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. The next 3 months were the most focused period of my life. Patricia connected me with a forensic accountant named Martin who specialized in family business disputes. He was a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of highlighting documents in 4 different colors depending on what he found. By the end of our first meeting, his yellow highlighter was almost empty. Yellow meant potential problems. "Your father has been operating this business as if he owns it outright," Martin said, spreading bank statements across his desk. "Salary payments to himself, distributions, equipment purchases, even personal expenses run through the company accounts. None of this was disclosed to you or approved by you as the legal owner." He pulled out another stack of papers. But here is where it gets interesting. About 18 months ago, the business took out a significant line of credit, $300,000 secured against the commercial property. I felt my stomach drop. The property in my name? The property in your name. Your father signed the loan documents as the operating manager, but legally, you are liable for that debt. If the business defaults, they come after that building. Your building. I asked what the money was used for. Martin flipped through more highlighted pages. From what I can trace, about half went to actual business expenses, new equipment, vehicle repairs, employee bonuses. The other half, he paused. The other half appears to have been distributed to your father and brother as performance bonuses and investment capital. $150,000, given to themselves from a loan taken against property I owned, without telling me, without asking. I went home that night and did not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, doing the math over and over. My father had essentially used me as collateral for his own enrichment. If anything went wrong with the business, I would be left holding the debt, while he and Daniel walked away with the cash. The next morning, I called Patricia and asked her to start preparing documentation of everything. Every transaction, every signature I had given without full disclosure, every decision made without my knowledge or consent. "What is your end goal here?" she asked. "Are you looking to take over the business, sell your interest, force a buyout?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. I want to know all my options, and I want my father to have no idea that I know any of this until I decide what to do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I can work with that." Over the following weeks, I became an expert in my own family's finances. Martin provided detailed reports. Patricia explained my legal rights in each scenario. I learned that as the sole member of the LLC, I had the authority to remove my father as operating manager. I could dissolve the business entirely. I could sell the properties. I could do almost anything. And there was nothing he could do to stop me without my signature. The same signature he had spent years collecting, without ever explaining what it meant. During this time, I kept up appearances. I went to Sunday dinners when invited. I smiled at my brother's stories about his big deals at work. I nodded when my father talked about his plans for the company, his retirement timeline, his vision for the future. He never once mentioned that none of it legally belonged to him. One Sunday in late September, my mother pulled me aside after dinner. "Audrey, your father has been stressed lately. Business pressures. I hope you are not adding to his burden with your questions." I asked what questions she meant. "He mentioned you called asking about taxes or something. Documents." She waved her hand vaguely. "You know how he gets when people poke around in his business affairs." I assured her I was just trying to file my taxes correctly. She seemed relieved. "Good. You know your father works so hard for this family. The least we can do is trust him." Trust him. The man who had put $300,000 of debt in my name to fund bonuses for himself and my brother. The man who was planning to hand over a business I legally owned to a son who had no idea his inheritance was actually his sister's property. I smiled and said, "Of course." 2 weeks later, I discovered something that changed everything. Martin had been digging into older records, trying to establish a complete timeline of when my father had started using my name for asset protection. What he found went back further than either of us expected. "These records are from when you were 19, he said over the phone. "It looks like your father opened a business credit account in your name, signed as your authorized representative using a power of attorney." I had never given my father power of attorney. "He forged it?" Martin hesitated. "I cannot say for certain, but the signature on the power of attorney document does not match your other signatures from that time period, and there is no notary stamp, which would have been required." My father had not just used me, he had committed forgery to do it. When I was barely an adult, still living in a dorm room, completely unaware of anything beyond my homework and my part-time job at the campus bookstore, my father had created a fake document, giving himself control over my financial identity. The credit account had a balance of $42,000. It had been paid off by rolling the debt into the larger business line of credit, the one secured against my property. $42,000 of debt I never knew existed, created with a forged signature, now attached to a building I never knew I owned. I sat in my apartment that night with all the documents spread across my kitchen table. Tax forms, bank statements, loan agreements, property deeds, the questionable power of attorney. A paper trail that told the story of a daughter who had been used as a financial shield for over a decade. Patricia had warned me that pursuing the forgery angle could get complicated. Family cases often did. Prosecutors were reluctant to get involved, and civil suits could drag on for years. But she also told me something else. You do not need to prove forgery to exercise your rights as the legal owner. Everything in your name is legally yours. The documents say what they say. Your father created this situation, and now he has to live with the consequences of his own paperwork. The consequences of his own paperwork. I thought about that phrase a lot over the next few weeks. My father had spent years building a structure designed to protect himself, never considering that the person at the center of that structure might one day decide to use it. His birthday party was scheduled for November 15th, the big celebration, the announcement about Daniel's future. I started planning what I would bring to that dinner. The weeks leading up to my father's birthday were a careful exercise in patience. I continued attending family events. I smiled at the right moments. I asked my brother about his work and listened to my father's stories about difficult clients and lazy employees. I helped my mother set the table and complimented her cooking. And every night I went home and added another page to the folder Patricia was preparing. She called it my ownership portfolio, a complete record of every document proving my legal control over Thompson HVAC and its associated properties. Deeds, registrations, tax filings, bank account authorizations, everything organized, dated, and copied in triplicate. If this goes to court, we want no ambiguity, Patricia said during one of our preparation meetings. Your father may try to argue that the arrangement was always understood to be temporary, or that you knew it was just a formality. We need to show that you were never given that information, and that you have been actively excluded from any decision-making, despite being the legal owner. Martin had finished his forensic analysis by then. The final report was 47 pages long. Over the past 8 years, my father had paid himself a total of $612,000 in salary and bonuses from a company he did not own. He had authorized $180,000 in distributions to my brother for various business development purposes, none of which were documented in any meeting minutes or formal resolutions. He had used company funds to pay for personal expenses, including his car, home repairs, and a vacation to Hawaii that I vaguely remembered hearing about 3 years ago. Total value extracted from the business that should have required my approval as sole owner? Over $900,000. And then there was the debt. The $300,000 line of credit was not the only liability. Martin had found 2 equipment leases, a commercial insurance policy with premium financing, and several vendor accounts with outstanding balances. All told, the business owed approximately $420,000 to various creditors, all of it in my name. Here is the difficult reality, Martin said when he presented his findings. The business itself is profitable. It generates solid revenue and has good client relationships. But your father has been treating it like a personal piggy bank. The debt load is manageable if the company operates normally, but if something disrupts operations, you could be looking at significant personal liability. Something like the sole owner deciding to make changes. I asked Martin what would happen if I removed my father as operating manager. Legally, you have every right to do that. Practically, it would be complicated. He has relationships with all the clients, he knows the employees, he handles the day-to-day operations. If you removed him without a transition plan, the business could struggle. What about selling? Martin considered this. The properties alone are worth more than the debt. The commercial building has appreciated significantly since it was purchased. If you liquidated everything, paid off creditors, you would probably walk away with somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000, depending on market conditions. $300,000. the amount my father had borrowed against my property to give himself and my brother bonuses. There was a certain poetry to that number. Patricia asked again what outcome I was looking for. Control of the business, a buyout, complete separation. I told her I was not sure yet. I wanted to see how my father handled the conversation first. What conversation, she asked. The one where he tells the whole family that Daniel is taking over. I want to see if he even hesitates, if there is any moment where he considers that maybe he should mention who actually owns everything he is giving away. Patricia nodded slowly. And if he does not hesitate, then I will know exactly what kind of person I am dealing with. The morning of November 15th, I woke up early and went for a long walk. The air was cold and clear, and I spent an hour just moving through my neighborhood, thinking about what was going to happen that evening. I had 2 options prepared. The first was the folder, the ownership portfolio, documented and undeniable. If my father made his announcement, if he stood up in front of the whole family and declared that Daniel was inheriting something that was never his to give, I would simply present the truth. No drama, no accusations, just paperwork. The second option was silence. If somehow my father acknowledged reality, if he pulled me aside before dinner and admitted what he had done, if he showed any sign of recognizing that he had spent a decade using his daughter as a financial tool, I was prepared to have a different conversation, one about transition plans and fair compensation, and maybe, possibly, finding a way forward that did not involve lawyers. I knew which option was more likely. By 4 p.m, I was dressed and ready. I had chosen my outfit carefully. A simple navy dress, professional but not flashy, the kind of thing you might wear to a business meeting. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a conversation about ownership and legal documents. The folder was in my bag, 32 pages of truth. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6. Cars were already lining the street. My father had invited everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, business associates, neighbors. This was not just a birthday party. This was a performance. My mother greeted me at the door with a glass of champagne and a distracted smile. "Audrey, good, you are here. Go say hello to your father. He has been asking about you." He had been asking about me. That was new. I found him in the living room, surrounded by a small crowd of relatives and friends. He was telling a story about some difficult installation job from years ago, everyone laughing at the right moments. When he saw me, he paused. "There she is, my accountant daughter." He said it with a smile, but there was something in his eyes I did not recognize. Wariness, maybe, or calculation. "Happy birthday, Dad." He pulled me into a brief hug, the kind that looked warm from the outside, but felt like obligation. "We should talk later," he said quietly. "After dinner. There are some things I want to discuss with you." For one moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was going to acknowledge something. Maybe he had realized what he was about to do and wanted to handle it privately first. Then Daniel appeared at his side, clapping our father on the shoulder. "Dad, Mr. Henderson wants to hear about the Riverside project. Come tell him about the new contract." My father's attention shifted immediately. He was gone, absorbed back into the crowd of admirers, leaving me standing alone with my champagne glass and my bag full of documents. Whatever he wanted to discuss, it was not important enough to finish the conversation. I found a seat in the corner and waited for dinner. Dinner was served at 7:30. My mother had outdone herself. Roast beef, 3 kinds of vegetables, fresh bread, a table decorated with flowers and candles, like something from a magazine. 42 people filled the dining room and the overflow seating in the living room. I was placed at the main table, but at the far end, next to a cousin I barely knew and across from one of my father's golf buddies. Daniel sat at my father's right hand, the position of honor. The meal passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. People asked me about my job, my apartment, whether I was seeing anyone. The same questions I had been answering at family gatherings for years. I gave the same answers. Work is fine. The apartment is small but comfortable. No one special right now. No one asked about the business. No one ever did. That was Daniel's territory. By 8:15, plates were being cleared and my mother was bringing out the cake. 65 candles arranged in neat rows. Everyone sang. My father blew them out in one breath and the room erupted in applause. Then he stood up. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. He had always been good at commanding a room. 65 years. It sounds like a lot when you say it out loud, but when I look around this room, at my family, my friends, the people who have supported me through everything, I do not feel old. I feel grateful. More applause. My mother was beaming. As most of you know, I have spent the last 37 years building Thompson HVAC from nothing into something I am very proud of. It has not always been easy. There were years when I was not sure we would make it, years when I worked 7 days a week just to keep the lights on. He paused, letting the weight of his sacrifice settle over the room. But I did not do it alone. I did it for my family, for my wife, who has stood by me through everything, for my children, who are my greatest achievement. I watched him carefully. His eyes moved across the room, landing briefly on my mother, then on Daniel. They did not stop on me. And now, as I start thinking about the next chapter of my life, I want to share some news. Here it comes, I thought. I have decided that it is time to start transitioning the business to the next generation. And I am proud to announce that my son, Daniel, will be taking over as the head of Thompson HVAC. The room exploded. People were clapping, cheering, raising their glasses. Daniel stood up, accepting handshakes and congratulations with the easy confidence of someone who had always known this moment was coming. My father continued over the noise. Daniel has been working alongside me for years now. He knows the clients, he knows the operations, he knows what it takes to succeed. I have complete faith that he will take this company to even greater heights. More applause. Someone shouted something about keeping it in the family. I sat very still. Not once in that entire speech had my father mentioned who actually owned the company he was giving away. Not once had he acknowledged that every document, every deed, every registration listed his daughter as the sole legal owner. Not once had he even looked at me. I was invisible, just like always. My father raised his glass. To Daniel, the future of Thompson HVAC. Everyone drank. I did not lift my glass. Daniel made a short speech about being honored and working hard and making his father proud. People laughed at his jokes and nodded at his promises. The whole room was caught up in the celebration. When the noise finally died down and people started moving around again, getting coffee and dessert, I stood up. "Dad," my voice cut through the chatter. A few people nearby turned to look. My father's smile flickered, just for a moment. "Audrey, not now. I said we would talk later." "I think we should talk now." The room was getting quieter. People were noticing. My mother's face had gone pale. "Audrey, please." Her voice was strained. "This is your father's night. Whatever it is can wait." Actually, it cannot. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. 32 pages. Everything Patricia and Martin had helped me compile. Everything my father never wanted anyone to see. Before Daniel accepts his new position, I think everyone should understand exactly what he is inheriting. My father's expression changed. The warmth, the performance, the proud patriarch, all of it drained away. What was left was something cold and calculating. "What are you doing?" "I am clarifying ownership." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, the deed to the commercial property. This is the building where Thompson HVAC operates. According to this deed, filed with the county recorder's office, the property is owned by me, not Thompson HVAC, not Dad, me, Audrey Thompson. Silence. Complete silence. I pulled out the next document, the LLC registration. This is the official registration for Thompson HVAC LLC. According to the state, the sole member and owner of this company is me, has been for 6 years. My brother was staring at me like I had grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that Dad has been running a company he does not own. Every decision he made, every dollar he spent, every bonus he gave himself and you, it all came from a business that legally belongs to me. My father's hand came down hard on the table. That is enough. No, Dad, it is not. I pulled out the loan documents. $300,000. That is how much debt is currently secured against my property. Debt that was used to fund bonuses for you and Daniel. Debt I never approved because no one ever told me it existed. I pulled out the forensic accountant's summary. $900,000. That is the total value extracted from my company over the past 8 years without my knowledge or consent. The room was frozen. 42 people, staring at documents they did not fully understand, trying to process what was happening. My father's face had gone from cold to something else, fear maybe, or fury. Those papers do not mean what you think they mean. It was a tax strategy. You knew that. You signed everything willingly. I signed because you told me to, because you said it was just paperwork, because I trusted my father. I looked at him directly. Did you ever once explain that you were making me the legal owner of everything? Did you ever tell me about the loans, the distributions, the decisions being made in my name? He did not answer. Did you ever consider that I might want to know that I was liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt? Still nothing. I closed the folder. You spent 30 years making me feel like I was worthless, like I was a burden, like I did not matter to this family. And the whole time, you were using me to protect yourself from your own financial risks. I picked up my bag. Daniel cannot inherit what was never yours to give. The business, the properties, all of it. It belongs to me. It always has. I turned toward the door, then stopped. I will have my attorney contact you next week to discuss transition options. Until then, I would recommend not making any major financial decisions. As the legal owner, I will need to approve them. I walked out of that dining room with 42 pairs of eyes on my back. No one tried to stop me. The drive home that night was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. No radio, no phone calls, just me and the road and the slow realization that I had actually done it. I had stood in front of my entire family and told the truth that my father had spent a decade hiding. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my apartment. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. I turned it off without looking at any of them. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to 43 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Most were from family members I barely spoke to, demanding explanations or accusing me of ruining my father's birthday. A few were from my mother, ranging from confused to furious to pleading. Daniel had sent one message, just one. You need to fix this. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I called Patricia and told her what had happened. How did he react? She asked. He tried to say it was a tax strategy, that I knew what I was signing. And the rest of the family? They were in shock. I do not think most of them understood the implications. Patricia was quiet for a moment. They will understand soon enough. Once your father realizes you are serious, he will have to make a choice. Either he negotiates a fair settlement, or he tries to fight you in court. And if he fights, everything becomes public record. Everything. The forged power of attorney, the unauthorized loans, the distributions to himself and Daniel. All of it. What do you think he will do? Based on what you have told me about him, he will try to pressure you privately first. Family guilt, financial threats, whatever he thinks might work. When that fails, he will probably try to find a legal angle to challenge your ownership. But the documentation is clear. He created this structure himself. It will be very difficult for him to argue that you are not the legal owner when every single document says exactly that. She was right. The pressure started 3 days later. My mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to your father, after everything he has done for this family? I let her in. I made her tea. And then I showed her the documents. The loan she did not know about. the distributions to Daniel that came from debt secured against property in my name, the forensic accountant's report detailing years of financial decisions made without my knowledge. She read through everything slowly, her face shifting from anger to confusion to something that looked almost like grief. "He never told me any of this," she finally said. "He never told me either. That is the point." She left without saying much else, but she stopped calling me a family destroyer after that. Daniel tried a different approach. He showed up at my office during work hours, demanding to speak with me privately. "You have to drop this," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "You are going to destroy everything Dad built." Dad built it using my name, my credit, and my liability, without my knowledge or consent. It was for the family. You were always going to be taken care of. Was I? Because at that dinner, when Dad announced you were inheriting everything, he did not mention taking care of me. He did not mention me at all. Daniel did not have an answer for that. "Here is what is going to happen," I continued. "I am going to exercise my legal rights as the owner of Thompson HVAC. If Dad wants to negotiate a fair transition, I am open to that conversation. But fair means acknowledging what was done, compensating me for the liability I have carried, and restructuring the debt so it is no longer in my name. And if he does not agree, then I will make whatever decisions I need to make to protect myself." Daniel left without another word. 2 weeks later, my father's attorney contacted Patricia to request a meeting. We met at Patricia's office. My father sat across the table from me, looking older than I had ever seen him. His attorney did most of the talking, offering various proposals that all amounted to the same thing. Let my father keep control, accept a small payout, sign some papers, and go away. I declined all of them. "Here is my counteroffer," I said. "I will sell my ownership interest to Daniel for fair market value, as determined by an independent appraisal. The proceeds will first pay off all existing debt, then compensate me for the years of liability I carried without consent. Whatever remains, Daniel can use to continue operating the business." My father started to protest. "Or," I continued, "I exercise my rights as sole owner and remove you as operating manager immediately. I hire my own management team and run the company myself. Or I liquidate everything and walk away." The room was silent. "Those are the options. Take your time deciding." It took another 3 weeks of back and forth, but eventually they agreed. The appraisal came back higher than Martin had estimated. The properties had appreciated significantly. After paying off all debts and calculating fair compensation for the years of unauthorized use of my name, I walked away with $418,000. Daniel got the business. My father got to retire, knowing that his legacy survived, even if it cost him almost $500,000 to buy back what he thought he already owned. We do not speak anymore. Not really. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apology, no moment where my father admitted he was wrong. I did not expect one. But last month, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. Me, at maybe 4 years old, sitting on my father's lap at some long-ago family gathering, both of us smiling. On the back, in my mother's careful script, "He did love you. He just never knew how to show it." I looked at that photograph for a long time. Maybe she was right. Maybe, somewhere underneath the favoritism and the neglect and the years of being treated like an afterthought, there was something that could have been love if it had been given room to grow. But love is not just a feeling. It is a choice, made over and over again in small moments. It is asking your daughter what she wants before making decisions that affect her life. It is explaining documents before asking for signatures. It is seeing your child as a person, not a tool. My father never made those choices. I put the photograph in a drawer and went back to my life, a life that is finally, completely mine.